and Rich will introduce himself here in a second. But tonight we're talking about off-grid living in tiny houses, but just also in generally about getting your power from solar panels and other forms like that. I've been living in my tiny house off the grid for about 8.5 years at this point. Richard is down in Arizona, and he's been living off the grid as well. So Richard, let's hand it off to you here. Introduce who you are, how long you've been living off the grid, and kind of what your situation is there.
Yeah, so my name's Richard Ward. I've been living at tiny since 2015. I started my tiny house journey in 2013, and founded and started Terraform Tiny Homes, which is a tiny design and consulting business. And it's about 1.5 years, I started Terraform Homestead, which is a 24-acre property in southern Arizona. The property being in Cochise County, they have their owner-builder opt-out, so it's actually one of the few counties that I've found that actually not only make tiny houses legal, but welcome them. Okay. In the 24 acres I have, I've started a small community. So basically I house people, feed them, and then they work on the property, learning different off-grid living skills, building, stuff like that. So kind of host a mix of people that either I house in one of my tiny houses, or also host other tiny housers, van lifers, RVs, stuff like that out here.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, with 24 acres, you got a little bit of room to work with out there.
It's nice, and everything north of us is public land, so it's like 24 is mine, but there's just thousands of acres, and the nearest neighbor is a 1/4 mile away. So okay. It's definitely better than living in the suburbs, in my opinion.
Yeah. So let's kind of break down what off-grid means, because like off-grid for me is a little bit different than other people's. What does off-grid mean to you? What's your definition?
So off-grid in my personal situation means when I bought the property, there wasn't a road to get here. And so I ended up putting in the road to get to the property. We don't have city water, city electricity, city anything. Right now I have my water trucked in, so I'll get 5,000 gallons in a big, semi kind of truck every 6 months or so. All of our electricity comes from solar, and then basically we handle our own waste and trash. So we don't have septic. We do composting toilet system out here. We compost any kind of food waste stuff, and then any trash that we have, we actually have to haul into the dump ourselves. So when I say we're off grid, the mailman doesn't show up here, kind of thing.
Okay, so yeah, that's pretty intense, especially if you're getting water trucked in.
Yes.
Could you talk?
Eventually,
yeah.
Eventually, we're working on setting up rainwater collection systems. So we are in the desert, but we're high desert, and we do get enough rain here that you can collect your own rainwater if you have enough surface area. Okay. The issue is I live in tiny houses, and so they have tiny roofs. So over the next several months, I'll be building a lot of big shade structure kind of things to collect rainwater so we can be fully independent out here.
Yeah. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Curious because I know people are gonna have this question, if you don't mind sharing, what does it cost to have like a truck show up with 5,000 gallons of water? Is that something you're willing to share?
So I pay I just switched to a different company. 4,000 gallons delivered cost me about $350, and that'll last me 5 to 6 months, and that's supporting 4 or 5 people out here. With that, we're very, very, very stingy with our water, and so we're not taking 30-minute showers. We're taking 2-minute showers. I do have it set up so that the camp area that we have for people, the water has to get physically hauled back there from it's 100 yards away, but I just want to make sure that people coming from the city who've never lived off grid in the desert, they're hauling their own water, so they respect it, kind of thing. And they're not leaving the faucet on because they know how hard it is to carry 55 gallons worth of water back 100 yards to camp.
Yeah, and that's actually really smart. Like you're basically putting in these friction points so that people really think about the water that they're using. That's really smart. So, can you talk to me a little bit about your solar array? Like, what does that look like? The size, things like that.
Yeah, so I actually have two different setups here. And so I have a setup for the main home area, the main area, which is my house, our underground school bus, community area, pump house, our root cellar, and then what will be the big house eventually.
Mhm.
That system is about, I think it's 2,800 watts. And then I use two Tesla. They're actually salvaged out of Tesla vehicles. They're
Okay.
250 amp hour at 24-volt batteries. And then it's a big charge control and stuff. And I've run basically 6-gauge wire all through the property to get to
Oh, wow.
our greenhouses and stuff like that. And so that was, I think, 500 feet of trenching or something like that out here, which is a lot. Yeah, and then the camp area, we have a 1,200 watt system and one of those Tesla batteries, so 250 amp hours, and that runs our RV, my little tiny house, my 54 square foot house, kind of the camp kitchen, and then one RV spot.
Okay. Gotcha. So kind of my system for comparison for folks, it's a 4,000 watt system. I think it's 1,100 amp hours in my batteries, but they're older, and now it's like kind of getting close to the time that I have to start to think about replacing them, and that's a big bill. I think that's going to be like
Yeah.
$5,000 just in batteries alone, right?
Yep.
So but that system is just for running my tiny house and one person. So the fact that you're doing so much with your system for so many people is pretty impressive. So I
Yeah.
got to assume you're not doing a lot of heating, cooling off these units.
No, so we don't have any outside of a floor fan. We don't have cooling out here in any of the units. That was fun last year because I do have an AC unit in my big tiny house
Yeah.
for when I was on grid, but it was 105 and it won't run that AC unit. My solar won't. So it was 105 and I'm just looking at this thing I can't use. I do put timers on all the refrigerators and stuff like that. So those are set to turn off at like 9 o'clock at night and turn back on at like 6:30 in the morning. So we're not using power overnight
Okay.
on those. Everything has LED lights, things like that. I think, some of our biggest draws are the refrigerator and stuff like that. But with the system I have, and we're in Arizona where it's sunny 360 days a year.
Yeah.
And so, we get plenty of power in. My batteries are full by noon every day.
Mhm.
And then from noon till 7 o'clock at night, it's just running directly from the sun.
Okay. Yeah. That's I think Arizona is probably one of the higher solar gain states, if not like the number one. I think it's up there in terms of
Yeah.
like being most optimal. Where I'm at in North Carolina, it's a solid okay.
Yeah.
But in the winter, definitely I start to notice. And actually, after about 2 years on my original system, I ended up upgrading and adding quite a few panels and some extra batteries to kind of try to close the gap on that, because I was really tired of using generators. And they were just like, I used them so infrequently that every time I went to use it, the carburetor was clogged. And I was like at 2 a.m., it was always 2 a.m. raining and I need to clean the carburetor. Like it never without fail. So are generators any part of your power makeup there?
No, I will eventually get a welder that has a generator built in, just because that's the one big tool that I can't run on my solar system that I need frequently, or will need. I would like to have, I should say. I don't need it.
Right.
I've lived a year without it, but soon, because the desert destroys everything, and lumber prices are pretty comparable to what I can get steel for at the scrap yards these days.
Wow.
There's a junkyard. It's about 20 to 25 more expensive to get steel than it is wood, but
Right.
steel will last forever, and wood is gone in 5-10 years out here. So soon I'll be doing, once I start the shade structures for Rainwater collection, I'm going to be doing all those out of metal, and at that point I'll get a generator welder. But it's so quiet out here. We don't have road noise. We don't have anything like that. I would rather not have power than listen to a generator. So
Yeah.
even people who come out here who have an RV or something like that, I'm like, you either need to be on solar, you need to hook up to our solar, but you're not doing a generator out here. It's just obnoxious. So
Yeah. I used to have one of the little Honda EU generators, like the little inverter ones, and those were amazingly quiet. But the downside, well, there's two downsides. One, they're expensive. I was willing to pay it, but they were pricey. The second one is they can't do 240. They can only do 120, which means like there's certain things that it just can't do. Like running air conditioning, or if you have laundry that's out, charging your batteries on your solar panel array. My system will only accept 240 to charge those batteries. So
interesting.
Yeah, it was like I really liked that generator, but like just because it was 240, it really kind of limited the usefulness. I ended up being like this big honking Generac one that was like a third the cost, and it had that 240. It was like 5,000 watts, loud as all get out, right? I mean, you could hear it a half a mile down the road. So yeah, I could definitely understand that sentiment for sure.
Yeah. And especially out here with the dry air, I mean, my nearest neighbor is a quarter mile away, and occasionally, if it's a calm day, I can hear her radio. A casual conversation from 1/8 of a mile away when there's no wind, you can hear out here. So with that, I don't want to be giving that new noise pollution to neighbors and stuff like that when I have to.
Yeah. So I think it is clear to even me talking with you like that this lifestyle, we'll call it, or living off the grid, is not probably for everyone. And even if it is for you, I'm sure there's an adjustment period. So could you just talk a little bit about, when you first went off grid, what that was like, and kind of how you had to adjust things?
Yeah, so I guess for me, jumping from going to this property wasn't a huge jump because I lived on the road for 4 years before this. So I lived in a variety of a 54 square foot tiny house, and I lived in my vehicles that I converted and stuff like that. I did a good chunk of the Pacific Crest Trail, so I lived out of a 60-liter backpack for 3 months and hiked 1,100 miles. So just having a place that I can put a shed and I can have tools and stuff like that, for me personally, was just amazing. It's a different lifestyle out here. So again, there's so many things that you take for granted in your normal life, like a flush toilet. Everything goes away. You put your garbage on the curb every Thursday, and then it just goes away. When you live off grid, I think the biggest adjustment is you realize nothing just goes away. You have to take care and manage and deal with everything. And if you don't do that, the javelinas come and they get into your trash, and then you have trash all over the entire property that you have to go pick up, or the mice or whatever, or bugs. And you're very in tune with the natural environment here. When you're living in a city, people have kind of taken over, and so you don't actually have any nature anymore, and so you feel like you're in control. But when you live in a place like this, you realize you're living in someone else's house. You're dealing with the nature kind of thing. And if it's a windy day, or if it's 105, you're not working. You can try, but you're just going to beat yourself to death. So I think that was one of the biggest adjustments. And with the community and the off-grid living and stuff like that, I do video chat with everybody before they come out here, and I let people know we are either for people or we are not for people. There's no middle ground. Either you're going to do well out here, or you're not going to make it out here. And we've had people show up and leave within 24 hours. We've also had people that come out here for a week and are like, I want to stay for 6 months. And so it's for people and it's not for people. I think the biggest thing for me and the reason I am out here is because I have freedom to do what I want. So I don't have to deal with building codes and inspections and stuff like that. So I have freedom to build whatever I want. I don't have neighbors telling me you can or can't do this. And I bought the property, paid it off within a year, and my property taxes are $168 a year.
Wow.
My electricity bill's nothing. My water bill's $700 a year. Propane bills maybe $200 or $300 a year. Eventually, would love to do rainwater collection so that water bill goes away. Start doing more preserving and growing our own food and stuff out here. So food bill goes away. So it's like, realistically, if I can get down to a couple $100 a month and retire and do what I want to do and build the cool stuff that we're building, and that to me is worth the struggles of dealing with javelina getting in the trash can and dealing with the heat and the wind and the other elements out here, because I enjoy the freedom of being off grid. So if you're somebody who needs creature comforts and a hot shower every day, this is probably not the place for you. But if you're somebody who wants to connect with nature and live in something bigger, doing kind of the off grid life is amazing.
Yeah. And I think when people really think about this, or they're considering it for themselves, or dreaming about one day, I think there's this perception that you have to go like you living in the desert, totally remote, trucking in your water and all that. But I think there's there's some give and take to this, and I think what's important, and you let me know if you agree with this or not, but it's figure out what's right for you. And there's no police running around being you are off the grid or you're not, right? Figure out what level of off the grid for you is right. So to kind of, as a contrast, I knew that whatever land that I wanted to be on, I was I don't care if it's a well or if it's city water, but I want to be able to walk over to the tap and turn it on, and clean water runs out, and I don't have to count the ounces or gallons that I'm doing, or worry that I took an extra minute in the shower this morning, right? I knew that was something for me that was just the right fit. Go ahead.
I was going to say, so some of the people around here, some of my neighbors in our little mountain range that we're in, I say there wasn't a road to get to our place whenever I bought it, but 30 minutes from here, there's Sierra Vista, which is a town of 40,000, and I call it a Walmart town. So it's got all the hardware stores and Applebee's and all that kind of stuff. I don't go there outside of errands. 30 minutes, we have Bisbee, which is a super cool artsy town, live music. Sorry. Live music, arts, good food, that kind of stuff. So it's we're off grid, but we're not removed from society. And then even in this little mountain range, there are houses that have a well that's solar. They're all on solar. They're completely off grid. There's no city tie to them, but they're 2,000 square feet, have central heating and air conditioning, and what you would find in any normal suburban environment. The difference is cost, and so what you can afford. And so for me, I paid $23,000 for my land for 24 acres because there was nothing on here, versus if I was to buy 24 acres with one of those houses and everything already installed, I may be paying $250,000, which realistically for a house is not that much, especially these days, and especially to be independent and off grid. But it's what I wanted to pay cash for, and I wanted to build it myself. And so eventually I'll be building a 1,500 square foot house, and I'll be doing rainwater collection. I probably won't do a well, just because a well out here is $25,000. And to me, we're near a lot of old mines and stuff like that. And so that has potential to contaminate the groundwater. Plus a lot of agricultural stuff are going on. So it's kind of draining the aquifer. So I don't want to rely on a well. But in theory, you could do a well. It's just going to cost you $25,000. And so
Right.
for me, I'm okay with living uncomfortably. Like when I moved out here, basically my little tiny house was not suitable to live out here with. I had a partner at the time with cats, and 54 square feet during the winter with 2 people and 2 cats, that was not going to happen. So we ended up buying a 32-foot RV that, you know, for the first couple months we were trucking in water 30 gallons at a time from town in those 5-gallon jugs in the back of the car. You know, we had a very, very basic like 200-watt solar system for a lot, but it's called Visible Wireless, which this is clearly a resounding, you know, ad for now. But it's functional. I heard you talk about Starlink, so I'm already signed up on their beta testing whatever thing, and that's supposed to be here, this part of the world, like mid to end of this year.
Okay.
So I'm hoping that's a game changer. But yeah, rural internet, especially because I run a marketing agency and I run a design and consulting business, is tough. Because anything that's reliable is going to be like $300 or $400 a month. Anything that's affordable is not going to be great, is what I've found. So.
Yeah. Yeah. So I've never done this before, but Nicole Clark asks, you know, how much does your internet cost? So like with the one that you're using right now, what does that run a year roughly?
That's $40 a month, and it's the only unlimited, unthrottled hotspot that I could find.
Okay.
For me, since like I said, I run a design business, so we do video, website, stuff like that. I'll run through 200 gigabytes of data in a month, and most plans are like, they cap you at like 20 something gigabytes. The issue with the visible hotspot is you can only technically run one device at a time. So I've got a device, it's called a RAV power device, that it hotspots to the RAV power. So my internet system is all kinds of complicated with toys. I've got a cell phone booster that goes into the house, that goes to the phone, which hotspots to the RAV power, which lets me hotspot multiple devices. From the RAV power, it goes to a repeater, which is on our school bus, so that way we can run internet from the bus and the main house and kind of the camp area.
Yeah.
So for $40 a month, it's functional. Like,
Yeah.
I think now it seems to be working pretty good now that I'm back at my house and closer to the actual phone. So
Yeah. That's so in my tiny house, I don't have internet run out to it at all. So I hotspot all the time from it. And I just go over Verizon. I have their like top tier plan, but at I think 15 gigs hotspotted, it drops you down to like 600 kbs, which really isn't that useful. Yeah. I mean, it's okay for sending emails and stuff like that. So on days that I know I have like big to move and video conference day to day that I just need to do a lot of like heavy lifting in terms of internet bandwidth. But you know, you can do that with your coffee shops. You know, some people are just going to the office and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I think you just make it work.
yeah.
So, but what's really nice, so you and I actually do somewhat similar things. Like I run the website and all that kind of stuff, and you know, many things you could call marketing. It's like it's nice to be able to earn a living way out where you live, right? Like I can do this from anywhere. I have a laptop and an internet connection. So,
And I did a.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, so I started my marketing business a month after I moved into my big tiny house. And one of the most important things when I started that business was something I could do remotely.
Yeah.
So I was still working whenever I was traveling all over the country for 4 years. I backpacked in Europe for 3 months and, you know, worked over there. I hiked the PCT and would just duck into town once a week, get on the laptop or the computer at the library for 3 or 4 hours. And I had people helping me, so they kind of staffed and dealt with daily client stuff, and I would check in once a week. So For me, when I started my business, that was one of the most important things, is I want to be able to work wherever I want to work. And
Mhm.
living where I'm living, you know, I could probably get a marketing job in Tucson, but that's an hour and a half from here. There's not marketing jobs around here. So that was that was
Yeah.
important. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think because of, the pandemic and all that, we're getting to a place where like it's actually possible for that average person to get a remote job. And
Yep.
what I tell people all the time is like, if you want to live off grid, go get a big city job that pays big city salary and turn around and go to a really low cost of living place and build your dream, your dream tiny house, your dream homestead, whatever it is. Um,
Yep.
totally do that, right? Because you can like really bring up the income while reducing your cost of living in a huge way.
Yeah.
It could
And
mean that
that's
you're like working less hours, or you're just banking a bunch of money so that you could retire early or retire on time for some people, things like that. What were you gonna say?
Yep. I was gonna say that that's exactly what I did. Is most of my clients are still in Dallas Fort Worth,
Okay.
where it's a big marketing hub, and so I can charge Dallas rates. But I'm living in Cochise County, where you can get 24 acres for $23,000, pay cash for your, systems and all that kind of stuff. So, I
Mhm.
can charge Dallas rates, but then live out here where I'm not paying rent, mortgage. I'm paying $168 a year in taxes, no
Yeah.
electricity, limited water, and so my plan is, and I'm just about 30. I'll be retired by 35, and kind of my income I want to shift from that marketing work to doing more workshops, building classes, things like that out here on the property, so that I can do 5 or 6 workshops a year, and that will be enough to supplement my retirement income. So
Yeah.
that's
Um,
kind of the loose life plan, at least at this moment.
yeah. So my lose life plan is kind of tracking a little bit later than you. I was kind of gunning for 45, is when I would like still do the website, of course, because I love doing it. I'll never stop doing that, but not having like other side hustle kind of things, and really just kind of at that point. Um, so I want to actually take a little bit of a right turn here. I want to shift to a building technique that you've used to start to put together, I guess, a root cellar it is.
Yep.
Um, and that's called earth bag building. So for people who are uninitiated, what is earth bag building and why should someone consider it?
So, earth bag is essentially what it sounds like. It's a bag that's filled with earth. And so it works really well in more arid climates, so like where we are, and climates where they have a lot of clay in the soil.
Okay.
So basically, what we did is, for our root cellar, um, dug out a big hole, took these bags, which there's earth bag, there's super adobe, and there's hyper adobe, and they're all very
Okay.
similar techniques. They're just slightly different. Earth bag, you have individual bags, super that you fill with dirt, and then you wet the dirt, fill the dirt bags with dirt, and then you tamp them, you compress them. And what that does is it hardens as the clay dries and basically makes a brick. And then basically you take those, or you stack those bricks, and then you put layers of barbed wire in between them, and that locks everything together. It's a very inexpensive way to build. It takes a lot of physical work and a lot of time, but very little money, and it's something that basically that root cellar is going to outlive me. It'll last 100+ years with very little maintenance. It's just a really natural, earth friendly way to build, very inexpensive way to build, because I'm not shipping lumber from halfway across the country to my build site. I'm literally building with the dirt that we pulled out of the ground.
Yeah.
And so we built the root cellar. That was our first really big build out here. It took about 6-7 months, working kind of on and off on it, just because you are shoveling, you sift the dirt so you get the bigger rocks out of it. You wet the dirt, you put the dirt in bags, and then you stack them and tamp them down until you get the structure that you want. I originally, whenever I bought the property, had planned on doing a shipping container house for my main house. And I've since shifted to decide to do an earth bag house, largely because lumber prices, construction materials, stuff like that are either very, very expensive or just plain out not available right now. And so being able, I was looking at the cost of getting, I was going to do basically 3 shipping containers, 2 40-foots and a 20-foot on top. Just the shipping containers were going to be somewhere between $12,000 and $15,000 delivered, whereas my whole budget for the earth bag house done is about $20,000. And so, I'm able to build a probably about 12 to 1,500 square foot house with $20,000. Some of the other benefits of them. So you have generally between 12 and 20 inches wide of the earth bag. So they're the structure, but they're also the insulation. They're everything. And the cool thing about living in the desert is we may have a 30 to 40 degree shift in temperatures between high noon and midnight. What that earth bag does is all day when it's hot out, it sucks up that heat and soaks it into the walls. And then as it cools down, that heat is released and it's released into the house. So all day it keeps kind of like being in a cave. So all day it keeps the house cool. And then whenever it gets cool outside, it releases that heat and it heats your house for you, basically. So the people out here that I know that have them, basically they say the only bad days that they have is whenever it's cold, like cold and cloudy, like 3 or 4 days in a row, because their house hasn't had the chance to get that thermal mass.
Right. Yeah. So if I understand it right, you're using like these bags, right? They're kind of a synthetic material, plastic or something like that.
Yeah, essentially. I can attempt to give a tour. Actually, I can grab my hotspot and we can walk. We'll do a live tour. It may be easier to see if ignore the mess in my tiny house, but
well, hey, this is the real world, right? Not everyone lives
exactly
in Instagram ready house.
It's not a show ready. That's why I was in the bus. So you guys get a live tour of the property. Our root cellar out here was the first priority because we knew we were going to do a community. And so being able to store food, whenever it's 100 and something degrees out and you have vegetables in an RV, they're gone in a day. Whereas this root cellar will stay about 70 during the summer and about 50 during the winter. So I'm looking forward to the summer throwing up a hammock in there and riding out the heat of the day in your root cellar. So,
oh wow!
This is our I call it the boot. It's about 1,400 earth bags, all hand sifted. I probably won't go all the way down because we will lose cell signal in there, but basically you can see, so it's these bags, and then basically each of these bags is hand-filled, sifted, tamped, and stacked up. The entire root cellar part, like I said, if I go down there, there's no way I'm getting cell signal, but that's kind of the idea behind it. And like I said, it'll stay 70 degrees during the summer, 50 degrees whenever it's 20 degrees outside. So it keeps a good temperature control.
Yeah. Okay, cool. And I would say the bags are pretty inexpensive.
So for the root cellar, we did electricity down there and everything, plus excavation. I think the whole thing was under $1,000.
Wow.
For about a 10 by 10 room.
Okay.
Not including, labor cost was the community members and stuff like that. So there wasn't, your big expense is going to be manpower. But when you run a community, people come to learn how to do earth bags. It's a very simple process. Once you get the systems down and stuff like that, it's just, each of those bags is 40 to 50 pounds, and we did 1,400 bags.
Yeah, that adds up. So we had a question here about like how deep is the root cellar there?
Yeah, so it's from the ground level to where we dug down was 10 feet. The root cellar itself, so there's 2 feet of gravel at the bottom. And so my thing, you're supposed to do gravel as a base, like foundation. My thought was just to do the whole floor as gravel, like a pea gravel. So that way, worst case scenario, if it did flood or something like that down there, I've got 2 feet before anything's ever going to get wet and it'll
Right.
dry out. We are on kind of a hill where that root cellar is, so I'm really not worried about any kind of water moisture or anything like that down there. So it's from the roof to the ground level above ground is about a foot. If I were to do it again, I would do that a couple feet, just so it actually stayed a little bit cooler down there. But it is what it is. I'm not redoing it at this point. But yeah, the total depth is about 10 feet. The inside is about 8 feet, and then it's about a foot underground. Plus, you have the dirt on all sides.
Right. What did you? So I'm assuming you built your walls up, and then you laid a member like a timber or something across the top, and then you.
Yeah. So I use it's 4-inch by 1-inch tube steel, and then a 1-inch subfloor decking, basically like a plywood decking, asphalt paper, a metal roof, and then dirt on top of that.
Okay. Very cool. Yeah. So like obviously labor, it just like the man hours must have been staggering. Like, so how many man hours do you think, or people hours?
I don't have any clue. So we would have 2 to 3 people working on the root cellar, and we would get about what's called a course, so a complete row done. We do about a course every 4 to 5 hours with like 3-4 people working on it, and it's probably 30 courses high, something like that. So I went to art school, so that's too much math for me. But we started it mid-May, and we got the bags done early December with taking about 2 months off. But that was our main project every day, 5 days a week, 20 hours a day or 20 hours a week per person working out here. And so with the community too, we would fluctuate. Sometimes we'd have 6 people working on it. Sometimes it would be 2 of us working on it. But short answer is a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. That is a lot. Because I know it's not the same thing, but it kind of reminds me of like the earth ships where they basically fill tires with compacted sand or dirt. And I always marvel at the sheer amount of work that goes into those. And then I also realize that a lot of those people build them while doing a class to teach other people. So they like finagle extra help, usually for cheap or free, which like, you can appreciate, but it's like, it's still a lot of work. I mean, building a home or a root cellar is no small task. And then you add in extra labor. So I guess all in all, right. Would you do it again? I mean, you're thinking about building your
I will
house.
be. So yeah. So the root cellar, it's about 8 by 10, so 80 square feet. I'll be doing about a 12 to 1,500 square foot house, probably this next December. I'm not going to start that during the winter, but the loose idea for that is basically cylinders tend to work better for bigger structures. So anything more than 10 by 10, you wouldn't want to do as a square. It's just not structurally sound unless you do buttressing and reinforcements and all this kind of stuff. So my loose idea for the main house is to do a 20-foot cylinder underground, just again, because the root cellar stays 70 degrees during the summer, which is really nice. And so being able to have a space where people can come and cool off and stuff like that is really important. That also adds to basically no power air conditioning, because you can take just a little 12-volt fan and a vent pipe, and pipe that into the rest of the house so that stays
Yeah.
70 degrees, cools off the rest of the house. The 20-foot cylinder underground, 30-foot cylinder on top of that, and then kind of like almost like a comma shape with a little bathroom, bedroom, and then a second story with the bedroom, and then a big rooftop deck is
Okay.
the loose idea for the house. It's still in very early pencil sketches, and I would like, my loose plan is to go to Taos for the summer, for the worst of the heat here, and see if I can weasel my way into some earthbag, earthship, workshop kind of things. Because ships, they do the tires, but earthbag would be considered an earthship as well, or can be considered an earthship as well. Earthship just means self-sustaining home. So you can do it in a bunch of different construction styles. But I want to play with I've done the earth bag. We also do like retaining walls and stuff like that out of earth bag and cob. And it's basically, it's a free way to build outside of labor. Because we do a lot of cob construction, which is clay, straw, and sand. So we just did a clay pizza oven that's been awesome. So that was a fun community project kind of thing. And the only thing I bought on that was the bags, which was, I don't know, maybe $10. And then the fire bricks were expensive. Those were about $200, but the pizza ovens, I mean, massive. So I like working with what I have here, because we have mesquite trees that are sizes of bushes and stuff like that. We don't have a lot of like big timber to be building with out here. And I don't like paying for the crazy $9 of 2x4 prices right now, or the idea that it's getting cut down, shipped halfway across the country, is not environmentally sustainable process. So the more I can build off the land, the better.
Yeah. That one thing that comes to mind is, and it's fair to say that you're a hot, dry climate, correct?
Yeah. We get 15 to 18 inches of rain a year, but most of that comes within a 6-week period.
Oh wow. Okay. So kind of comparing that, where I'm at in North Carolina, we get 47 inches a year, and it's pretty even. Like it kind of starts to dip a little bit in like the summer months, but it's generally not. It's pretty even. The thing is, we have really humid air, and so I was curious. Probably not too relevant in your location, but can these be done in more humid climates or northern climates? I guess the worry would be like, mold issues or condensing surfaces because, warm, hot air hitting a cold surface kind of thing.
Yeah. So yes, it is possible. Is it something I would recommend? Probably not, because the structure of it. So when you do building it in a wetter environment is a nightmare, because whenever it gets wet, bags get soggy, and then they can start to like deform and stuff before you plaster it. So once it's plastered, it's weatherproof basically. So you have a closed system. You do either stucco, concrete plaster. We did a lime plaster for the Root Cellar exterior. I've been playing with earthen plaster, but not very successful yet with that. But once you seal it, it's sealed. And so you could do it up in a northern environment. They definitely do work a lot better in drier environments, just because if you imagine you open a window, all that moisture gets into the house, and then it doesn't have a place to go, kind of thing. So it's something that's possible, but there's a reason that people have been building kivas and adobe structures and stuff like that in this area for thousands of years, and there's a reason for that.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because it's something that I talk about a lot with people when it comes to tiny house design. Is like, there's a reason why certain building types are contextualized to the area of the world, or the climate they're at, is because they became popular because they work well, right? Like adobe works really well in hot arid climates, but you wouldn't do that in the Pacific Northwest, right? Like it just doesn't make a lot of sense. Yeah, so I had considered for a while making a cob home. I just love the look of that, but um, I realized how much labor it was, and then I think with the climate, like it may be a little bit challenging. I know there's people that definitely do it in the Carolinas for sure, but which actually made me think of something. Is the mix that you're putting in? I know you said you're sifting this to get most of the big rocks out, and then you wet it. Are you doing anything beyond that? Is it like a certain mix, like cob? I know is like sand, clay, and hay or straw.
Yeah, so typically with earth bag, you want to be somewhere between 20 and 30% clay, and that acts as a binder. And then your sand and other stuff is basically the building blocks. The soil that we have out here falls nicely in that range where earth bag you can do just from the dirt that's on the ground. If you had say you had an area that was just 100% clay, you wouldn't want to earth bag with that. You would want to mix in sand or with something like hyper adobe. So hyper adobe is kind of like earth bag, except instead of the whatever they are, polypropylene whatever bags that I'm using, it's kind of like if you've seen like the mesh bags that like onions and potatoes come in. It's similar to that material, and then you put a little, like 1 part concrete to 10 parts dirt, and you don't put the barbed wire, and so it actually forms one solid unit instead of having layers of bags that are held together with barbed wire. So I'm interested. I need to do a small scale. I always like to screw up on smaller projects versus a 1,500 square foot house. But I'm interested in the hyper adobe stuff. I just haven't done it personally yet. But you can there's a really easy way to tell kind of what you've got in your soil. Take a old jar, put half it, or fill it half with soil, fill the rest soil with water, shake it really, really good, let it sit for a day, and you can actually see the layers of clay, sand, other material, whatever stuff, and that'll kind of give you a good idea of if the dirt that you're working with is good for earth bags, or if you need to have, say, sand or clay trucked in, big trucks. Really, even if you have to have stuff trucked in, it's depending on where you are, depending on what you're getting, it's really not that expensive compared to most building materials.
Right. Yeah, I know in the past, so we have like red clay soil here, and it's I've done the jar shaking test, and I get pretty close to what it is. Usually I add a little bit more sand when I'm making cob, and I've done it twice, and both times it did not work out well. Like apparently I got my, despite like doing my research, I've never actually like been to a cob like workshop or anything like that. So I think that's probably the gap for me. The first time I had way too much clay. The thing cracked on drying. It just wasn't even. And then the second time I did it, it worked really, really well until it was a pizza oven, until I got my pizza oven to like 800 degrees. And then I noticed it cracked a little bit. And then, and then a tree fell on it, but that's another story. So
the other thing to do with clay is if you can find do that shake test, pull your clay out, and there's different levels of expansiveness in the clay. So some clay, it sounds like the clay that you're working with is very expansive. So that way, what that means is whenever all the moisture leaves, it cracks. And so it's a scale of like 0 to 10. If you're closer to that 10, that means your clay is really expansive and that it's not the best to build with. If your clay is around a 0, then it's not expansive enough, so it doesn't create that binding. So you want to be in that like 5 to 7 range, I think it is. And there's different ways you can test it. So you kind of like roll it up into a noodle and then like hang it. And if it stretches, then there's, I don't know, that's smarter stuff than I am, but I've watched a YouTube video on it, and so I pretend I know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I think getting like just some hands-on experience, which is why those workshops are good for those kinds of things, to like really see what it feels like, especially if you can do it in your local area, because then you're kind of working with your local materials, if you will.
Yeah.
Because it's been like it's so funny because it's so simple, right? But then here I've had 2 failed ovens on my hands basically. So I had some good pizza while I was doing it, so that's not a bad thing.
Yeah, and I have many broken ceramic pots that I've tried to make out here. That it's because our clay is fairly expansive too, so you have to learn how to compensate for that, usually with more sand or concrete or something like that in there.
Okay.
Or I should say cement, not concrete, but
yeah. So you were saying that like it does somewhat matter the mix that you are putting into these polypropylene or propylene bags, I guess it was.
There's something like that. I don't know. It's plastic bags. Yes. So it does matter the mix that you're going in. With earth bag, it's a little more forgiving than something like cob, because you're getting a lot of your structure from the actual bag itself, versus cob, which has to stand on its own.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. And then you do these layers. I know with cob, like they say like don't go more than 6 inches or 12 inches in a day. Do you have to worry about that with earth bags, or can you just keep on trucking?
I would say yes. You don't want to go more than 3 to 4 layers in any given day.
Mm-hmm.
Unless you have an army of 20 or 30 people out here, you're not doing more than 2 layers a day. Like even with the 10 by 10, I think the most we'd put in like a 14-hour day and got like 2 courses done with like 6 people. So I would say, if you're doing, like, we have some retaining walls that may be only 6 or 7 bags long. We'll only do 4 or 5 rows on those in a day. Give it 2 days to dry and then stack it up higher. But for the most part, if you're doing anything of any size, you're fine. Like, you're not going to get more than 2 rows in a day.
Yeah. Is there a ways with machinery to kind of, cut down
Speed
on
up
some? Yeah, I mean.
Yeah. So I recently invested in a.
That seems like
I recently invested in a concrete mixer, which I should have done 2,000 bags earlier. But because one of the most difficult parts that we found was actually wetting the soil and mixing that. It's not terribly difficult to put it in the bags and sift the dirt and stuff like that. But mixing it, which we haven't really used it much yet because we've only been doing some little retaining wall stuff. But a concrete mixer is something I should have invested in a year ago before we started anything. So I think that will help a lot. If you have like a backhoe or something like that, where you can just sift, build a big sifter kind of thing and then just use the backhoe, that would be super helpful. That's not something I have or plan on purchasing because they're very expensive. So Workawayers is awesome because they are excited to learn and stuff like that. And so you give them a shovel and you're like, we're shoveling all day for the next 6 months.
Yeah. So we had a question about the bags. Could you use canvas bags to do these?
My concern with, I'm not going to say no, but I would say I would be concerned about it because with the plastic bags, you keep a lot of that moisture in, so it dries a lot slower, which reduces that cracking. With a canvas bag, I feel like they would break down over time. So these bags, as long as you keep them out of the sun, they're gonna. It's like a plastic bottle. They're going to last 1,000 years, and so you'll keep that structure for 1,000 years. Whereas a canvas bag or something of natural material, I feel like would break down easier. I know with Hyper Adobe, people have used like burlap sacks So I think if you were to do something like a canvas bag, you would do something more along the lines of a hyper adobe, where you put some concrete in there, so that way it actually fuses everything together as one big lump. At that point, I assume the question is concerning environmentally friendliness sort of thing. Concrete and cement is really terrible for the environment. Plastic is really terrible for the environment. So it's one of those things where you kind of pick your poison. In my opinion, as long as you're using plastic responsibly, which I feel like this is because it's going to last for 100+ years, that's a responsible use of plastic versus like a single-use water bottle. So,
right, yeah, and I think
maybe
I get this a lot with tiny houses. They're like, "Oh, well, I saw you know, I don't know, you had a piece of paper in the background, and like that's not very sustainable." It's like, well, at some point, you do need to live a life, right? Like, we want to make intentional choices, and I think you can make really great strides, especially going off the grid or with like some of these more natural building materials. At some point, there is always a cost, right? Like just you being on this earth is going to kind of incur some kind of environmental toll. So we just have to be intentional about it, and kind of where that toll is and how much and where we can intelligently restrict the impact. Yeah.
Yeah, and even, you know, if you were to use something like a traditional 2x4 building, you know, that tree, yes, the tree is a renewable resource, but it's cut down, logged, shipped in a truck to a store. So it's like, you know, because I'm a big fan of this tiny house. This is my first one. Is SIPS build, structural insulated panels. So they're a big chunk of styrofoam, basically. And people are concerned about using styrofoam, and I 100% agree that using styrofoam in packing and stuff like that is completely unsustainable and terrible. This home, well maintained, will last 100 years, and so that styrofoam put into a contained, enclosed unit, not getting back into the environment, I feel like is okay, you know, from a morally kind of standpoint.
Well, especially with things like insulation, right? Like if you're heating and cooling your house, maybe in an on-grid situation, right? You spending up front more money and having a thicker, like a SIP panel, it's styrofoam or whatever, you know, spray foam, whatever it is, but that is enabling you to reduce your cost by 50, or your energy usage by 50% every single year of the rest of your natural life. Like, we need to do a cost benefit analysis on this kind of stuff for sure.
Yep. Yeah. So.
All right. So now with we're gonna wrap up here in just a minute, but with the earth bags and your root cellar, if you could go back and change things, I know you mentioned the cement mixer. Anything else that you would kind of give as advice?
I would probably go a little bit deeper on the actual first root cellar that I did, just so that way it stays a little bit cooler. The cement mixer and the work process on that, I think it's one of those things you learn as you go kind of thing. And so, you know, we got it done, but there's definitely, I'm looking for improvements on future projects. All in all, I've been really happy with the root cellar. I'm learning that out here in the desert where it's hot, building underground is actually the way to go. So we're kind of little hobbit cave people sort of things out here, especially during the summer. But even during the winter, when the nights get down to the 20s and stuff like that, it's nice to have something that's beefy. But yeah, I mean, as far as like living off the grid, I've really enjoyed it. I've screwed up a lot of stuff just because I haven't hired anybody to do anything out here outside of bringing the bulldozer in for our road and digging the root cellar, and you know, heavy excavation work is the only thing I'll pay for labor on. So yeah, I've screwed up a bunch of stuff, but that's what happens when you're coming from somebody like me who is like 6 years ago had never built anything in their life, and then now have 2 tiny houses, an underground school, and a whole community build. So You know, is there stuff I would change? Sure, because I screwed up XYZ. Is any of it detrimental to the homestead or my livelihood or anything like that? No.
Yeah.
So overall, I'm happy with living off grid, living tiny. It's not always easy, but again, my other options are to be living in an apartment in the city, working 40, 50, 70 hours a week, which I did for many years before going tiny. And I don't want to do that again. So I would rather the challenges of living off grid than the challenges of living in a city in an unhappy job and stuff like that.
Awesome. Well, I think that's a good note to end on. So, Richard, will you just tell people where, if they want to know more and connect with you, where they can do that at?
Yeah, so my business is Terraform Tiny Homes. I do tiny house design and consulting, everything from tiny houses to vans to buses to off-grid stuff, all kinds of stuff. My channels, I am a little bit active on YouTube, but mostly active on Instagram. You can find me at all the social stuff at Terraform Tiny Homes. I'll do a little plug there.
There we go.
And Terraform Tiny Homes, my website's terraformth.com.
Awesome. All right. Well, I appreciate it all. And thank you, Richard. And we will say good night.
All right. Thank you for having me.